Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent, Benjamin Yount. Let's drill right down into what is happening in Wisconsin, some of the stories that you've been filing. You filed one. It's a follow-up for a story that you wrote previously this week, and it has to do with vaccines.
This is one of these stories that you see quite often at the Capitol, that they're really, really inside baseball and technical and procedural. But at the end of the day, they really do mean a lot to a lot of people. And for this, we get to go to one of my favorite places, the Joint Committee for the Review of Administrative Rules. I know that when most people hear about JCRAR, their eyes glass over because this is essentially the legislature's rules committee. And sort of, Schoolhouse Rock's Civics 101, you have laws that are passed by lawmakers and then signed by the governor and then executed by the executive branch. You also have the great and vast ocean of rules. Lawmakers can't anticipate every single detail, all of the minutia across all of state government. And so you have inside various departments, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Health Services in this case, you have some authority in that part of state government, the executive branch, to create rules on how these things work. And the Department of Health Services, again this year, because they tried this last year, came out earlier this year with a list of new vaccine rules. And the big change was a meningitis vaccine requirement. That before it was, well, if you want it, sure, go ahead, but it wasn't required for kids to go to school. The other big changes came with the chickenpox, and mainly it added the chickenpox to the list of things, the list of diseases, the list of maladies, for which DHS could declare a substantial outbreak and then kick in its emergency powers. The other change that really frustrated a lot of parents, and they turned out at a hearing earlier this week, is that DHS wanted you as a mom or a dad to have to provide a doctor's note that confirmed, yes, in fact, my child did have the chickenpox vaccine as the only way, or as one of the only ways, for you to get out of getting the chickenpox vaccine. In a chickenpox outbreak, you get the natural immunity. That's just as good as the vaccine, but you had to have a doctor's note in order to do that. Before, parents could just say, yep, he had the chickenpox last summer. And okay, well, you don't need that shot. DHS did this without cooperating with the legislature. Now, to hear Democrats and defenders of DHS put it, they don't have to. The rulemaking authority is squarely within the bounds of their purview. To hear the Republican members of JCRAR put it, they wanted to work something out, but DHS went around the corner, and not to mention aggravated a lot of moms. So there was the hearing this week, 5 hours long, of mostly moms and advocates turning out saying, please do not do this. You then had a vote just before we turned on the microphones today. 6-4 Republican Democrat split, so not surprising there. But they scuttled these new rules. And State Senator Steve Nass, who's from the Whitewater area, said this is, one, a victory for the rule of law, in that it reminds the Department of Health Services that it has to work in conjunction with the legislature. And two, he said this is a victory for parents because it gives parents the decision. Now, none of this was surprising. We knew this was going to happen the minute they scheduled the hearing. And the other part that is not surprising, that we knew was coming, is State Senator Chris Larson. He is one of the more vocal and more liberal Democratic members of the state Senate. And his tweet just summed up the response from Democrats. He said, Wisconsin Republicans continue to spit in the face of science and public health. Today, 6 members of an obscure committee voted to repeal the meningitis vaccine requirement for 7th graders, despite recent outbreaks in the U.S., which have killed people. Now, there is no large outbreak of meningitis in Wisconsin. I'm sure there are certain cases, but there is no large outbreak that has been documented, certainly among 7th graders in the state, because no one has come forward and said there is a large outbreak of meningitis. But this just shows no matter what this rulemaking committee does, it is going to be partisan and it is going to be blasted. And the idea that JCRAR is an obscure committee, that is true. But then again, every committee at the Capitol is obscure in the grand scheme of things.
What is the major issues that people would have against these vaccines?
Whenever you talk about vaccines,
I know. It's like a third rail. You're not supposed to talk about it.
No, you're exactly right. For some parents, it is a third rail. And this was before the COVID vaccine. There are a lot of parents who are uncomfortable with all of the vaccines. Now, I had little kids 20-something years ago, and we just gave them their shots. The internet has changed this debate, and Jenny McCarthy didn't really do anybody any favors. But there are a lot of parents who aren't sure. And there are some kids medically who it may not be the greatest for. Look, we live in the state of Wisconsin where Aaron Rodgers was the center of the NFL universe because he opted not to take the COVID shot. And there were all manners of, well, is he inoculated? Is he protected? Is he vaccinated? And it's the same kind of discussion when you get down to schools. There are just some parents who don't want to get their kids shots. And, you know, the chickenpox vaccine is a new one. When we were kids, you know, your little buddy down the street had the chickenpox, your moms got together, and all of a sudden everybody got the chickenpox. And that was the way that we handled it there. But a lot of this does come down to not the science of these vaccines, the choice that parents have. That's what so many of these parents who testify this week said. They want to be able to make the choice. They want to be the ones who decide what goes into their kid's body. And then you add in that little extra of, well, DHS did this without really any publicity. DHS just did this without any oversight. DHS just did this on their own. And you get a bunch of parents who are already riled up. And then you add in that sort of, well, you're just going to take the shot and shut up about it. And you end up before JCRAR. And you get some sympathetic ears, and all of a sudden this is now not just about vaccines, but it is about reminding the Evers administration, which sometimes needs reminders, that there is a way that this works, and ordering things on your own, as Steve Nass put it, arbitrarily and capriciously is not the way it's done.
Listeners can keep up with this story at thecentersquare.com. This is Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.